there, welcome to Ridge Church. We're so glad that you're here with us, whether you're tuning in from right here in Charlotte, North Carolina, or from anywhere else. At Ridge Church, we know that life is messy, and we hope the message you're about to hear encourages you, challenges you, and reminds you that you're never alone. Thanks for listening in.
Nothing like a little Iron Maiden vibe and some coffee to get you going early in the morning. Hey, we are so glad you're here. My name's Chris. As Jim said, I get to be one of the pastors here, which is a privilege for me. And I started this series today called Right in the Eye. This is a series on the book of Judges. I'd love to take credit for all the creative parts of this series, but it was one that we got the framework from one of our partner churches. But I want to say we're starting the series today with one of the craziest stories in the Bible. Like if you're new to Bible study, you're going to be like, I didn't know that was in there. In fact, some of you have been reading the Bible your whole life. You're going to be like, I didn't know that was in there. And so I want to give you a warning up front, and this is kind of for fun, but also kind of serious. If you have kids in the room, this would be a great day for you to take advantage of Upstreet and Wamaland, unless you want to have some potentially awkward conversations with your children on the way home. This is not a PG kind of day, so I'll let you guys do with that what you want. But again, a series on the book of Judges. If you remember or perhaps know anything about the story of the Old Testament, then you'll remember this. And if not, I'll kind of bring you up to speed. But there was a part in the Old Testament where Moses helped deliver the children of Israel from Egypt. He said, Pharaoh. All right, you know the story. Some of you know the story. And as it was unfolding, the plagues and all the craziness, Moses delivers the children of Israel from slavery. And then for the next little bit, they have a little detour, a mild detour. When I say mild, of 40 years where they're stuck in the desert. And then eventually a guy by the name of Joshua leads them into the land that God has promised for them. Now, Joshua arrives on the scene about 1380, or this whole part of him delivering them into the promised land around 1380. And then if we fast forward, there's another guy that most of us, even if you didn't grow up in church, you know about King David, one of the most famous, probably the most famous king, perhaps Solomon right there close, but David bringing into kind of frame this idea of a monarchy for the first time, as well Saul and then David really bringing it to prominence, this idea of a monarchy, the first king, second king of Israel. And so God's desire was a theocracy, but he yielded because the people kept asking. He said, all the other lands around us want a king. Eventually they got a king. So David is in around 1050. And the reason I tell you this is because of what we're looking at as Judges is the 330 years in between Joshua and David is the time of the Judges. Now, during this time, essentially Israel was like a commonwealth. They had common ancestry. They had common beliefs and kind of value systems. They had a lot of things in common, but they did not have a common government. They had a common religion where they all believed in Yahweh. So there was many things in common, but government was not one of those things. And so again, if you know the history, you might know this part, but there were 12 distinct tribes within the context of Israel. There was Abraham. Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, and his 12 sons became the tribes. They grew into their own kind of people groups, almost like nations within the nation. Again, there were 12 of them, and there was no king at this time, again, because God's desire was to be a theocracy. God wanted to be their king. He wanted them to look to him as the king. And so during this time, the the idea of the judges, where they were the kind of the keepers of the law. If you think about it, it's like the Jedi. The Jedi were the keepers of the peace. You know, these guys were the keepers of the law. As people kind of strayed from the law, they would help tether them back or bring them back. Or as there was a cycle of people would move away from God, they would bring them back and help counterbalance everything to the law of God. And the law of God was essentially the heart of God and the things that God said, hey, if you can stay within the zone of my law, not because he was a God that was about rules, but if you can stay within the zone of my law, this is the best life of protection for you that will prevent the worst things that could happen from happening to you. And so that was what these guys were doing, these judges. And so what had happened in the scene that we're going to pick up with today, and really throughout the book of Judges, was that the nation had abandoned the laws of God. Now, the first question to that is why? And the answer is because they're like us. They don't like people telling them what to do, and we don't like people telling us what to do. And if you need to look to get confirmation of this, for those of you who are parents, just look to your kids. And if you can't look to your kids, you can look to my kids. I'll tell you a story about one of my kids. I won't tell you which one it was, but my youngest daughter, Brinley, when she's not here today, so when she was really like a toddler, and we already had, we have 4 kids, so 3 olders, and we're like, hey, we're pretty good at this parenting thing. And then we have Brinley, we're like, okay, we got to recircle this thing. She was a strong-willed child. And I remember one day our church was load in, load out, which meant we brought all this in, set it up in a place, tore it back down, put it in storage at the end of the day. And so we had this ladder. We were doing load in, load out. Brinley was there as a toddler, and my wife didn't want her to climb up the ladder because she knew that was exactly what she was going to do. Brinley was leaning on the ladder. She said, Brinley, do not touch the ladder. Brinley looked at her mom. She put her hands up, leaned her belly in, touched the ladder and said, I'm not touching it, right? Now, here's what happens. That individual grows up and you become adults, right? And you form a society. And here's what's true of all of us. The more rules people give us, the less we want to follow them. There's something in us, something kind of instinctual that pushes back and says, you can't make all the rules for us. You can't tell us what to do. And so in this time, the nation abandoned the laws of God. Now, let me just pause and say, Brinley's amazing. Don't send me an email later. She's turned out great. But there was this kind of sense in this culture and this time where people had rebelled from the law. They had disregarded God. And what they had said was, we know what's right. Listen, God, we don't need you to help us figure this out. We can figure it out. We can feel our way through this. We can think our way through this. We can emote our way through this. We can decide for ourselves what is right. And so they decided to abandon God's law. And as a result, one of the things that happens is we see a cycle all throughout the book of Judges. But I would submit to you that it's not just a cycle throughout the book of Judges, it's a cycle throughout human history and our families and our lives. But the cycle kind of looks like this. It starts with disobedience, like God says do it. We're like, I'm not touching it, but we are. And then from disobedience, it leads to disaster because someone was there to tell us, hey, don't lean on the ladder because then the ladder's going to fall on you and we're going to be in the hospital. It leads to disaster. And then in disaster, the thing that happened for them is the thing that happens for us. You say, God, I got myself into this thing. I know I shouldn't have done it. Like I shouldn't have even been here on this spring break. Like I know all my friends were telling me that I shouldn't even get married to this person. Like I knew I shouldn't go into this business deal with this person. I knew it wasn't right. But here we are, God. God, if you just show up, I promise you I'll serve you for the rest of my life. If you'll just help me out of this one. Disobedience to disaster, and then it leads to deliverance. And God would show up and God delivers. And God shows up and God delivers because it is God's nature to show up and deliver. And you rinse and repeat. And so as you look at this cycle, does it sound familiar? It kind of sounds like high school, doesn't it? Sounds like college. Sounds like the first 10 years of your journey in adult living, or perhaps the most recent 10 years in the journey of adult living. And this becomes literally a cycle that happens over and over again, and it's a rinse and repeat. And so for Israel, they're in this cycle of what we call the Judges for 330 years. Now, the book of Judges, as I've already alluded to, ends with an absolutely crazy story. And this story is in the Bible because it shows how bad things can get. And it's hopefully a preview for us of what to avoid, but it shows how bad things can get when a group of people decide to do whatever they want to do, whatever feels right to them. Every single time a group of people in human history do this, it devolves into chaos, if not immediately, eventually. So I want to set up the story. Remember, you got the 12 tribes. They've now grown into these massive kind of groups of their own. Some think millions in each of the tribes. Some say hundreds of thousands in each of the tribes. But these are large groups now. So they're like their own communities. And they're spread across this entire region. And so I want to introduce to you a couple of characters. There's a lot of moving parts. This is a complex story. So I'm going to break it down. I'm going to tell some of it, read some of the verses, and get you kind of to the end of it. But the first character in the story is a Levite. We don't know his name. We just know he's a Levite, which is one of the tribes, and we know that he is from Ephraim. Now, he had a girlfriend. His girlfriend was what they called in that day a concubine. This is like a kind of a mix between girlfriend and live-in and servant, and it's a perfect example of what it meant to abandon the law of God. This is one of the things God said to the group of people, the Israelites. He said, hey, I don't want you to crowdsource from other cultures how we're to do life and morality and relationships and all of that. And this is exactly what they had done. This idea of a concubine came from the Canaanites. They brought it into the culture. It was a corrupting kind of reality. And so this concubine we know is from Bethlehem. This is all we know about her, but we know that at some point along the journey between these two, the Levite and his concubine, that she was unfaithful. He finds out, and as you can imagine, we don't get the details, but some kind of fight happens. It doesn't go well, and she ultimately ends up saying, I'm out of here. He's like, fine, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And she takes off and she goes back to her family. Now, a little bit of time goes by. This Levite, and this is not in the scripture, but this part I'm pretty sure of. This Levite was sitting at one point on his back porch. He was drinking a Miller Lite. He was listening to a sad country song by Morgan Wallen, and he thought to himself, I got to get my girl back. And so he decides to get in his pickup truck and drive to get his girl back. You should read the fine print of the scriptures, right? He goes back to get his girl back, and he's like, hey, I'm missing you, baby. And this is what happens. Her dad is not having it. He's like, I don't know what you think is going to happen here. And so, like, you can't make this up. This is in the Bible. So what the dad does is every single night he gets this guy drunk. And so the next morning he wakes up and he's supposed to go back home to Ephraim, but he's got a headache and a hangover, and he waits. And by the time he's feeling good enough to take the trip, it's too late. And so this happens night after night after night. The dad would get him drunk. And finally he says, look, I have had enough. Like, I'm leaving no matter what. It was late at night. So Levi, he's done. He takes his male servant, takes 2 donkeys, takes his concubine, and he takes off later than he should have. Sometimes it wasn't safe to take off late at night during these time frames, but he did it. He said, I'm not going to stay here anymore. You can't trick me into this anymore. And he lands in a place called Gibeah. Now, Gibeah is where the tribe of Benjamin is, a lot of them, or it's one of the places where they're residing. And so there's a law of hospitality in this time frame that says, hey, if someone shows up in your town, you're supposed to take care of them, especially brothers. Because these tribes, they're now several generations away. They came from these brothers, and they're technically family. Like, they're all, part of the same family. And they said, so the law of hospitality is like, hey, when you show up to one of these towns, you go to the well in the center of town, and you wait, and someone will come by, and they'll let you stay at their place and keep you safe for the night. And then it is their job to protect you and take care of you for that night. So this is what they did. They go to the well, and they wait. And people pass by, but no one invites them to the home. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and no one invites them. And finally, after some time has passed, there's a man that comes who happens to be a person that used to live in Ephraim. They kind of hit it off. They have some conversation. He says, hey, I live in Gibeah now. I'm from Ephraim, but listen, I want you guys to come and be my guests, and I want you to stay in my house tonight. Now, this is where it gets really weird. Late in the evening after dinner, the house is surrounded by some wicked men, and I want you to listen to what they say. It says, bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him. Now, I'm guessing that has not been one of your memory verses to this point in your life. Now, This, we know from cultural context, was likely not about homosexuality. It was about humiliation. This was very common in Greek culture or Roman culture, where men would kind of assert their dominance. This is a very male-dominant culture. It was pervasive, and they would assert their dominance by doing things like this. And it was kind of this saying, "Hey, look, we don't want visitors in our town. This is what we're going to do. We're going to place humiliation on you so that then word will spread and you won't come here and take up our resources. This is our place, our people, and we're going to humiliate you. We're going to teach this guest a lesson, and then the word is going to spread." And this is what happens. The owner of the house, it says, the owner of the house went outside and he said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do such an outrageous thing." He's saying, hey, listen, guys, we all know there are laws of hospitality. Not to mention there's just humanity and there's morality and there's decency. Please don't do this thing, but it gets worse. This is what it says. He says, "Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish." To which you read that and go, how is that a better alternative? This story started off bad, and it just got 10 times worse. But no one's sleeping in church today, right? This is a depraved reality that is happening. He continues, says, "But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and he sent her outside to them, and what happens next is so vile and so depraved and so beyond comprehension that I won't even read it out loud." Talk about, there's so much talk in our culture about toxic masculinity. This is toxic masculinity. That instead of defending, they serve up the woman. This is depraved, unbelievable scene that's unfolding. The next morning, this man wakes up and he opens the door to find his concubine dead. He doesn't know what to do, he's beside himself. So he puts her body on a donkey, he takes his male servant, and he leaves town. And as you can imagine, he is angry. And the more he thinks on it, the more he sits with it, the more angry he becomes. The laws of hospitality have been broken. His very life was in jeopardy. Perhaps he's angry because the more he reflects on it, he realizes the role that he should have had, what he should have done, what he did do versus what he should have done. All of these things are kind of culminating, and he gets back home and he decides there must be some kind of justice for these actions. So he writes a letter. He writes a letter to the leaders of the 12 tribes, and he wants to address this horrific thing, this horror, this thing that should have never happened. And then he has this thought as he's writing the letter. He's like, man, this is going to get lost in the shuffle. It's like the email that comes in at 4 on a Friday, and you're like, it gets kind of to the bottom of the stack. So he has an idea, and as you've already seen in this story, there haven't been many good ideas in this story, and this is not a good one. He has this twisted idea. He decides to take his concubine and chop her into 12 pieces. And he takes those pieces and he wraps them up in a package with a letter, and he sends them to the 12 tribes. Now I want you to imagine, a few days later, an Amazon package arrives. Can you imagine these 12 tribe leaders? They're like, hey, you got this package, babe. I didn't order anything. She probably ordered some Christmas stuff. And it sends shock waves through the tribes. Everyone's talking. The leaders of the tribes are talking, and they realize that their culture has hit an all-new level of depravity, an all-new low. And this is what they say. It says, everyone who saw it was saying to one another, such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. They're saying, this is not normal. This is not okay. This is not normalized for us. This is not behavior that we have seen or are okay with. Just imagine. We must do something, so speak up. These guys are like, man, it's this realization. You get a box, you get a package like this. It's a realization that there's a moral slide. More than a moral slide, that there's this realization that, guys, we are in a moral free fall. And so they decide that these leaders, that they're going to put together an army. They're going to send to Gibeah, and they're going to bring these perpetrators to justice, like finally somebody in the story doing the right thing. So they have this message that goes out to all the tribes. And they say, hey, we want you to send your warriors. We want you to send representatives. And it says this, then all of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead, came together as one and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. Now, all the men of all the different tribes, they got together, and the scriptures tell us that they made a pact, that they gave an oath. They said, listen, this horrible thing that has been done by the Benjamites, we will never allow any of our daughters to marry any of their sons, any of their men. We will never happen. We will never allow it to happen. And they make this oath. And then these guys, this group of people from the 12 tribes, from the other 11 tribes, I should say, they march to the Benjamites, to the gate, and they demand that the perpetrators would be delivered. And you would think they just hand them over, they handle business, and they move on, but that's not what happened. When they get to the gate, you got to realize that the Benjamites had received the same Amazon package. So they knew that these people were coming, and instead of handing these guys over, they stood as an armed guard and protected them. They said, you can't have them. These are our people. They will abide by our laws. They will stand judgment only with us. There has been no trial. And so they defended them. And let me just pause here and say that when there's a culture, when guilty people aren't made to take responsibility, it leads to incredible depravity. When there is, and this is a slippery slope because sometimes we don't realize it's happening. Listen, let me just talk to you parents for a second. Like when we get into a place with our kids where we so don't want them to be hurt that we don't allow them to take responsibility for their actions. We don't actually help them. When we come to our kids' defense rather than making our kids apologize or own what they did, we don't actually help them. We don't help the culture of our family. We don't help the culture at large. It leads to depravity when people aren't made to take responsibility for their actions. And here we have a group of people that everyone would agree they need to take responsibility for their actions. Yet because it's their brothers, because it's people that are close to them, they defend them and they stand between. And an attack ensues between the 11 tribes and then one. And in a little bit unexpected, the Benjamites actually drive out the other 11 tribes. And thousands, literally tens of thousands of people on this first day of battle, they die. Second day, same thing happens again. The Benjamites are shielding these perpetrators. This attack is happening. And again, the Benjamites drive back the other 11 tribes and tens of thousands of people die. And on the third day, they realize we've got to have a different strategy. And so they fake the same thing. They go in and attack, and they act like they're retreating. And as they're retreating, the Benjamites chase them. But this time they have a flank, and they send a group to the city, and they set the city on fire. And when the Benjamites see they're chasing these guys out, when they see that their city is on fire, they turn around and they run back to the city. And at that point, the war begins to change. And at this point, the 11 tribes are so enraged that these guys won't do the right thing. They're enraged at all the tens of thousands of people that have died, that they just lose sight of everything. And they are so blood hungry that they destroy everything that the Benjamites have. They burn it to the ground. They kill the husbands and the wives and the children. And when they're done, they go to the next town and the next town, and every town that has Benjamites in it, they do the same thing. They kill the men, the women, and the children, and they burn it to the ground. And just when you think it can't get any worse, it does. There's 600, the scriptures tell us, 600 of these Benjamites that escape. So 600 of these soldiers, and they fled far off the battlefield, and they find themselves in fear, of course, hiding, and they're hiding for about 4 months. And there's this moment 4 months later where the other 11 tribes have a moment that they come to a realization. They're like, oh no, what have we done? Like, this is the Incredible Hulk moment. Like, he's raging out, and then all of a sudden he's Banner again. He's looking around at all the damage around. He's like, what happened? Like, while I wasn't around, what happened? And they come to their senses. and the dust settles and they realize we have just done a genocide on one of our people groups. We have wiped out the whole people group. We have to repent before God. And so they go to God and they repent of what they've done. They say, God, we don't know what happened. We don't know how this happened to us. And in the back, one person raises their hand and says, hey, well, there's still 600 guys. They're hiding out over there in the field. So maybe we can figure this out. They said, well, but remember, we made a covenant that we wouldn't give any of our daughters, an oath that we wouldn't give any of our daughters to these guys. So 600 men, they're headed towards extinction either way. And so one of the guys again in the back says, hey, well, were there any cities that did not participate in the war? Were there any ones that didn't send men to participate? And somebody says, yeah, actually there was Jabesh Gilead. They didn't get involved. This is the point where you don't want to be a part of Jabesh Gilead. They say, like, obviously you can imagine no one from this group is volunteering their daughters, like, oh, we'll send our daughters to the 600 men in the desert. So this is, again, where you think it can't get worse, it gets worse. So this is what the 11 tribes decide to do. They send a smaller army to Jabesh Gilead, and they kill everyone there. All the men, all the women, they save the young women, they kidnap them, and they take them to the men in the desert. And they say, hey, listen, bad news. We burned down your village. We killed all the women and the children. It was a terrible thing. Good news, we got 500 women for you. Bad news, there's 600 of you, so 100 of you drew the short straw. This is happening in real time. And so in the midst of this, they say, but we feel bad for those 100. So they say there's this festival that's going on in Shiloh where the women, they come out and they dance in the field during this kind of festival. And so the men that don't have wives, this is a great idea. They brainstorm this. The men that don't have wives, they can go hide in the field while this dance is happening, and then they can run in there and they can steal some of the women and they can take them back as their own. And technically everybody wins because now they're all going to have women. They're going to be able to have marriages and children and rebuild the tribe that we annihilated. And we don't break our oath because technically we didn't give our daughters away. They stole them. Any questions on how we save the tribe of Benjamin? This does not feel like logical conversations happening at any turn in any way. And so that is what happened. If you can imagine these men leaving the festival with these women over their shoulder, they march back to this smoldering city to restart the tribe of Benjamin. And then the book of Judges ends. That's it. It ends right there. Like, talk about a cliffhanger. Like, if this is a Netflix series, you're like, oh, there's got to be another season. They're going to have to drop another season of that. There are no heroes. There's nothing good. And if you grew up in a household with a family that did family devotions, I'm guessing they skipped this story, right? This one wasn't in there. It's a disastrous story. But then there's one final comment at the end of the book of Judges that really is the heart behind this series. It says, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Now, let me just say, I'm not playing into any of the cultural commentary that's going on right now. I have nothing to do with that. This is what the end of the book of Judges says. In those days, there was no king in Israel, meaning there was no final authority. There was no theocracy. They weren't seeing God as the final authority. There was no God-honoring king that was seeing God as the final authority. There was no one to draw the line between right and wrong. There was no one to draw the line between good and evil. There was no one to say, hey, this is moral and this is immoral. In other words, there was no objective standard by which they determined morality because there was no king, no godly king to impose the law of God. And remember, the law of God is about protecting us, not preventing us. It's protecting us from ourselves because the movement of humanity is towards depravity. He says, there was no king. In those days, there was no king in Israel. And it says, and this is the consequence. This is what happens. And so therefore, everyone did what was right in his own eye. They did what felt right to them. Now, we're reading this story and goes, doesn't feel right to us. But if there's enough of a cycle of a group of people who do what's right in their own eyes, well, what feels right to me is, well, what I think is right, when there's no moral objective standard, the result always is chaos. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. In other words, let me paraphrase this verse in my own words. In those days, there was no objective standard of right and wrong. So people did what felt right in their eyes. They did what felt right to them. And again, when we do what's right in our own eyes, when we just do what feels right to us and there's no objective standard, eventually chaos ensues and people get hurt. And the same thing as I think about this cultural moment in which we stand and live and try to function, the same thing permeates our culture. Same thing permeates many of our families. Frankly, it permeates the church. It's this idea, it's like, well, man, that's good for you, but like, this is my truth, that's your truth. This is like, this, what's right for you. Don't impose your values on me. What's right for you and right for me. I heard Andy Stanley say this, that the American dream, perhaps the unspoken American dream, is that we have the freedom to do what we want, when we want, with whom we want. But because in America we're not barbaric, we add this one little phrase, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. But here's the problem. Who gets to decide what hurts? You? Me? Like, who decides? Like, if there's no objective standard, like, who gets to decide? The problem is we can't define this. You can't have 10 people defining this. Like, for example, just say, hey, listen, here's the deal. I'm going to take your car. Like, some of you have 3. Like, I have none, so I'm going to take one of your car. Listen, that doesn't hurt you. You still got 2 cars. I had no cars. Now I got a car. That doesn't hurt you. Now you're saying, well, I'll tell you what hurts me. That was my car. I was going to give that to my 16, 15-year-old daughter. So yeah, it kind of hurts me. Listen, you got a lot of zeros in your bank account. Like, I don't have many zeros in my bank account. I'm just going to take a few. It doesn't hurt you. There's no net consequence to you. You don't feel any pain. Like, that benefits me. It doesn't hurt you. I'm just going to take that. Like, that doesn't hurt you. To which you go, I think it hurts my future. I think it hurts my family in the future. See, in a culture where there's everyone defining what is right and wrong by how we feel, the problem is this. What happens when freedom for me and what feels right from my vantage point ends up being suffering for you? This is one of the challenges, and I won't go down this rabbit trail. This is one of the challenges of socialism, one of the many challenges of socialism as a government. It's the idea, like, at some point, you got a government that may be immoral, that may not be based on the values of God, that says, hey, within this is protection, that decides what hurts versus what helps. And when there is no objective standard, eventually there's chaos and people get hurt. Listen, when a person, when a culture, when a family lives as if there is no king, when I say that, as if there is no God, as if there is no objective standard, which, by the way, if I can just say this and push it this a little bit, I think a lot of people, and maybe your story this morning is that you say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus. There are a lot of followers of Jesus that I think, and people that say they believe in God, that are functional atheists, because while we say we believe in God, there's little to no correspondence between that and our actions and our life outside of church. I was sitting in an evaluation meeting with my daughter and her soccer coach recently, and she had this great line. My daughter was explaining something. She said, look, don't talk about it, be about it. Just be about it. Don't talk about it anymore. Just go out there and do it. Sometimes there's a functional kind of dissonance between, we say we believe in Jesus, but we're functional atheists. But I say all that to say, if we live as if there is no king, if we live as if there is no God, if we live as if there is no objective standard, then there is no other option but to do what is right in our own eyes. It's the only thing we're left with. But if there is a God, and let me just say this particularly, if there's a good God, James, the brother of Jesus, says that our God, he's a father that wants to give good gifts to his kids. Jesus, representing the Father, laid down his authority and left his throne and came into the throes of humanity and the sinful, broken world and ended up on a cross. If there is a good God, that God, when that good God, is the standard from which everything in life is measured and flows, then everything in life changes. Cultures change, families change, and lives change. I've said this many times, I'll say it again, something that I quote often, that as humans, our role is not to decide truth. We're not good kings, we're not good gods. History confirms that. Our role is not to decide truth, it is to discover truth. That is our role as humans. And listen, truth is not a concept. Truth is a person. There's not many places in our world that will tell you this, but truth is not just an ideological thing that you find in a philosophy class. Truth is a person. John captures Jesus saying it this way. He says, I am the way and the truth and the life. Jesus says, hey, I'm the objective standard and I want what is good for you. My rules are not about keeping you from, they're about protecting you from. I want good for you as a good father wants good for their kids. So they say, hey, you can't play in the road. Well, you're taking away my freedom, Dad. No, I'm preserving your life. He's a good God. So I want to leave you with a question as we start this series. Would you be open to consider? Maybe you feel like you're already there. Would you be open to consider life with God as your king and as your standard? Even if you say, Chris, I don't even know what all that means. I'm not asking you to commit to all of it. Would you be open to consider life with God as your king and as your standard? Because I'm telling you, this will lead you to a different kind of life. It leads to a better life. It leads to a better family. It leads to a better culture. It leads to a better world. You know why we're giving out things to those that are in need? Because that's what Jesus did. It leads to a better world when we adopt the culture of his kingdom, when we let him become the standard of who we are and what we do. And let me just tell you, this works. This works. Find people that have committed their life to this, and you're going to find the kind of people whose life you want to emulate. You want your kids to be like their kids. You want the way that you run your business to be like the way they run their business. This works. But even as I said that out loud, I thought about this quote from Niels von Kamm. He says this. He says, Christianity isn't true because it works because it's true. So I want to end with some good news. I need some after this sermon, right? God, in his grace and compassion, will step into the chaos that you and I have created and that our culture has created by doing what we thought was right in our own eyes. He doesn't shy away from that. That's the very thing that Jesus did on the cross. He didn't say, well. He stepped into the chaos out of royalty, into the chaos of humanity, onto this ball of dirt called earth, and he was bruised and beaten for it. He stepped into the chaos that was created by us doing what was right in our own eyes. And he redeemed it. And that's not just what Jesus did on the cross and in the empty tomb. That's what he does because that is his character. So the good news for you and I today is we're just one step away from a new path to say, okay, I give in. I don't understand all of it, but I don't want to just do what's right in my eye. I want to let you be the objective standard in my family, in life, in morality, and everything around me, my compassion and grace within the community to flow from that reality. And last thing I'll say, never say the Bible is boring. Let me pray for us. Father, you're good. And even though humanity is broken and we tend towards broken things, you stepped into that brokenness and you continue to do that. And right here in this very moment, you are and you will do that. For the person that's here trying to figure out if you even are, God, I pray that you would give them the grace to move towards you and in your direction, knowing that you've already moved towards them and in their direction. And God, for those of us that somewhere along the way, even as Christians, have started to source our truth from whatever feels right to us, will you give us, God, the humility to submit back to saying, God, you are the standard, and I'm going to do everything I can to figure out how to make my life flow from you as the standard. God, give us the courage and boldness to live in such a way. And then I pray, Father, that this church would be just a little bit of a glimpse of your kingdom here on earth. We love you. We need you desperately. In Jesus' precious and powerful name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for listening today. If you're in the Charlotte or Matthews, North Carolina area, You're always invited to catch us online or join us in person at one of our 2 service experiences, 9:30 and 11 a.m. in the Ridge Auditorium or streaming live to our cafe venue. We hope to see you soon.